from all the work I've done, I can only talk about probabilities, that we are overdue for one, but I don't know when it's going to come. And I can say, yes, we're going to have one. Whether it's a small one or a large one, I don't know. So that's the best I can do. Now, I would be saying something entirely different if I had real evidence that there was one, that somebody had actually detected one. And this would have also an EMP, what we call EMP, electromagnetic pulse, associated with it, similar to what a high-altitude nuclear explosion would do in the atmosphere.
Is that right? I
guess you'd say so, yeah. That's just me, I guess, that my interest is in helping humanity. And I'm interested in the truth and not living in some dream of some belief system that other people are telling you and doesn't fit the data. Well, yeah, there is a super wave on the way from the center of the galaxy. It's 23,000 light years traveled distance, and I believe there's not one but several on their way towards us. The future. In this case, you're dealing with a cyclic phenomenon, and we have the ice core record from both Antarctica and Greenland, and people have measured beryllium-10, which is an indicator of cosmic ray intensity on the surface of the Earth. So it sort of gives you a chart of how cosmic ray intensity has varied over the last few 100,000 years. And going back, you see these peaks. I had predicted you would find peaks when I did my PhD dissertation on this topic at Portland State University. And later the data came out, and indeed there were peaks. And you can take this and analyze it to look for the periods. You find there are certain periods that sort of come out of this data. And one of them is around 26 to 28,000 years, which is approximating the precessional cycle of the Earth. And in fact, the two tend to match up in a certain way, which is very interesting. Another is around 11,500 years, and the third one, there's one around 5,700 years, which is close to the Mayan calendar cycle. And you see that there was a major event at the end of the Ice Age between 11,000 and 16,000 years ago, and that we're in fact overdue now for another one. But there were smaller events. You see a small event around 5,300 years ago. It lasted maybe 20 years or so. And there's also very small events averaging every 500 years or so since then. There were 14 small puffs of gas that were emitted from the galactic center, which indicate it was active. But it wasn't active enough to create a peak that you could see in the record. So the small event didn't cause an ice age, but it did cause cooling. But in a larger event, we see these events occurring at the time of the initiation of the last ice age. You see them lining up not only with the beginning of the ice age, but also with the ending, and with major climatic transitions in between. So there's a definite connection between climate and the superwaves.
Planets be affected before we would?
Yes, the wave consists of cosmic ray electrons, gamma rays, X-rays, light, radio waves, across the whole spectrum, along with a gravity wave. And this is all traveling at the speed of light towards our solar system. In fact, it propagates throughout the whole galaxy, sort of like a spherical shell traveling out from the center of the galaxy. Gamma ray bursts. And yes. In fact, some scientists have theorized that the gamma rays are accompanied by charged particles coming along with them. That it's actually charged particles that generate the gamma rays on the way. And this is what a superwave is, except on a much larger scale. Instead of a burst just of a fraction of a second, we're dealing with something that could continue for hundreds, even thousands of years. The period that the Earth would be going through this storm, you can think of it as a galactic storm, okay. It could be anywhere from a few hundred years to thousands of years, like 4,000 years, maybe 5,000 years. I mean, there's in the record that we have, there's something like 12 to 15 peaks. No, they haven't arrived. We're in the eye of the hurricane, so the period, the nice sunny period in between the storm, before the storm arrives. And the thing is that you can't see them coming because they travel at the speed of light. So it's a phenomenon that's totally without warning, just like a gamma ray burst. They only know it when their detectors pick it up, and then they're able to locate where it came from.
Well, if it's coming to our solar system, wouldn't other planets be affected before we would?
Yes, it affects all planets, all stars.
So in a sense, you could see it coming if you saw the effects on other planets before it hit Earth. Is that right?
Well, the light from those effects on the other planets also travels the speed of light.
Oh.
So it actually lags behind the actual event itself.
Once in a while.
The forefront, we're talking about that really people should be brought in from outside to help on this. You know, this is something we're, you know, why keep it secret? We all want to help out to prepare for the next event. From all the work I've done, I can only talk about probabilities, that we're overdue for one. So that's the best I can do. Now, I would be saying something entirely different if I had real evidence that there was one, that somebody had actually detected one. Well, Starburst Foundation, for example, would go into high gear to say, you know, we've got to start preparing. We're not prepared for something like this. Not even for a Carrington event solar flare, which could wipe out all the power systems if we had one.
So are you saying that the superwave would result in the wiping out of the power systems?
Oh, yeah.
What other effects would it have?
The thing is, the superwave on its forefront would have a very dense sort of shock front of cosmic rays. And this would have also an EMP, what we call EMP, electromagnetic pulse, associated with it, similar to what a high-altitude nuclear explosion would do in the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And when this arrives, it's going to create similar phenomena, just like the starfish explosion. I believe it was near Hawaii, and when the EMP wave arrived, there were whole sections of the island who were having blackouts as a result. It also would fry electronic circuits, phones would go out. We've had even smaller events like gamma ray bursts affect the communication systems and do damage to our communication systems. So something like this would pretty much roast all the satellite equipment we've got. Cell telephones wouldn't be working, TV would be off the air if it depended on satellite. Perhaps telephones would continue to work if it was fiber optic. It was insulated from this sort of thing. Your power lines would pick up the pulse, the wires would have a huge voltage surge, which would fry the transformers, the step-down transformers, to go from your million-volt voltages down to your voltages you use in your house. The cars that are all now with chips in them, in a case of a EMP from a nuclear explosion, for example, they warn that it could fry the chips in a car.
And this is something that could last 400 years, you're saying? Once in a while.
Well, the forefront, we're talking about something that might just be minutes.
Okay.
And it would be probably preceded by a gravity wave, which would cause earthquakes, seismic events all over the Earth.
Okay.
Not just in one place. So that might be the first warning, actually, things shaking. The thing is that whatever they are, we can only guess because they're so far away. Most of the gamma ray bursts that we are picking up come from other galaxies, millions of light years away.
Yes.
There's been only one case. We've observed one that came from within our galaxy. It was a place near the galactic center, but not at the core.
Explosion.
Gamma ray burst. This was the first one they'd found that was emitted from within our galaxy. It was the most intense that they'd ever observed in the history of gamma ray observatory physics. And the coincidence of being just shortly after the worst earthquake we've had in 40 years. It's, you can do the probabilities, and you come with very small probabilities due to chance. And what's unusual there is that about 2 days before the gamma ray burst arrived was the worst seismic event that we've had in 30 years that caused the 2004 Boxer Day tsunami in Malaysia. And over 250,000 people could see that there was this both 13,000 and 26,000 year period there, but I was a little off perhaps. But pretty much the whole thing travels at the speed of light towards us.
So then it could happen at any time. What is, I mean, you know, am I right?
Yeah, we're in the danger period. We're sort of like, you have to realize, which a lot of scientists don't because their theories still believe that galactic core explosions are every 100 million years, but you have to realize that we're on the fringe of a volcano, galactic volcano. And it's an active volcano, and we should be expecting the eruption very happen. And it's interesting that the 5,300 year event, the small event of 20-year duration or so, occurred just before the beginning of the Mayan calendar cycle, the one that we're currently in. That cycle began 5,126 years before 2000. Or before 2012, so around 3,100 BC. Whereas we're seeing this event was around 3,300 BC, plus or minus a few hundred years, because we don't know accurately from the dating. We're relying on ice cores. Yeah, you know, what you mentioned about, you heard from this fellow who was in touch with a Black Project, or he was a Black Projects engineer, talking about space travel with superluminal spaceship.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if part of that is misinformation. I don't think it was our superluminal spaceship he's talking about. It was from an ET civilization. They'd been in touch with ETs who told him this.
Entirely possible. And it may have, I mean, that may have been entirely accidental because he may well have been relating that story second or third hand. But the principle was that he said, there's a wave coming. He couldn't describe it exactly. He wasn't a physicist, actually. He was an operative rather than an engineer. He said he thought the time scale was more like 2017, but he did say that superluminal craft had been out, taken a look at it, had reported what was going on, and that he said it could, I think his words were something like, it could just be a puff of wind or it could turn the Earth on its axis, but nobody really knows what's going to happen.
Well, I recently deciphered a crop circle, the one that shows the Avalon one that from 2008, shows the solar system, the planets arranged as they would be in 2012.
Right.
I think I remember reading something where you were talking about this. Hey, you know, Pluto's not where it should be.
David Wilcock has uses that in one of his talks.
Yeah, obviously in the wrong place.
Right, and because I know one fellow who's believing that this means the superwave will arrive in 2012, and he's actually working with people to build a shelter down in Australia right now, expecting that this will hit 2012. But my reaction is, why would they put that obvious error in there? And so I looked at it and noticed in the diagram that appeared 1 week later that shows what looks like Neptune's orbit, that circle, and it's marked, which seems to represent Pluto's crossing point on Neptune's orbit. And then it's got a little elliptical diagram with little circles as if dividing in 11 equal parts. And to me, that's an elliptical exaggeration of Pluto's orbit so that we don't mistake it as a circle, showing 11 subdivisions of Pluto's orbit. And if you take the period of Pluto's orbit and you divide it by 11, you come to the amount that Pluto's displaced in that crop circle.
Okay, yeah.
And if you add that to 2012, you come to 2035 AD with the exact date, June 8th, when that crop circle appeared. In other words, it would have been 27 years into the future from 2008,
Okay.
which is interesting. So what are they saying? Does that mean that's when a super wave will arrive? Will it be the time when the current one will end? That it might arrive 2012 or what? You know, we don't know. But there is something on the pulsar diagram that even before this happened, I had written about it on my website. Somebody had discovered that, having read my book, they wrote me an email, said, by the way, did you know that the periods you attracted our attention to the Crab and Vela pulsars, which are these two supernova remnants, which are very important, close to us, in addition to Vulpecula pulsar, that I had stated the periods for these three, that they sort of form a symbolic arrow, if you understand the pulsar diagram, as I call it. That the periods are very close to the Fibonacci series, which create the golden mean. And sure enough, if you take the ratios of the two longer period ones, they come to the golden mean ratio to within that, it's 10 to the minus fifth, the difference. In other words, 100,000th is the deviation from that, being perfect. But you notice that the Crab period is significantly off, and this is assuming if the second is a universal standard in extraterrestrial communication now, because I'm suggesting that the pulsars are an extraterrestrial message, that pulsar is at 33 milliseconds, so if it's really 34 is the number you come up with in the Fibonacci series. So if you say, when would the Crab pulsar have that period where it ends up being 34 milliseconds? Well, it's in the future by so many years, and it comes out not very far from this 2035 date. I was coming up with something like 2037 or so, 2038. So it seems like something's going on here. It's interesting.
Right, so there's some kind of message there, but you're actually deciphering it differently